Hey there, this is Justin Hampton, the founder of the Compensation Tool, aka CompTool, aka Squirrel Provider, Squirrel Tamer. Um, so it's a CompTool Tuesday. So wanted to take a couple of minutes to kind of do a roundup of what's happened this week. Uh, there's a lot of things that we've seen on some of the social media forums and some new changes coming up in a couple of weeks that we've seen with some laws. And really what we want to do with this time is just spend a little bit of time going through some of the things we've seen, talking shop, and taking some questions, and really just kind of doing some comp stuff. Now that I'm doing comp tool, I don't get to sit in the practitioner's chair as often, so this is kind of a fun way for me to stay current on what's going on and make sure that we know what's on the minds of folks. So one of the social media, I'll start off kind of looking at one of the things that we saw on social media this week, and a question that was really popular on one of the social media forums was, what do we do now that we've had this tremendous rate of inflation? Well, the question was, do we provide a stipend or some kind of bonus to provide inflation? And it got a number of responses, but I thought the idea of providing a stipend or a bonus to manage inflation, to combat inflation, probably isn't the best approach. Inflation is, the different rates of it vary from year to year. Right now, it's at a 40 plus year high. I think it's 8.5%. Last time I saw it, I think it was 7.9% the right before that. But I think the question is, what do we do to make sure that we are able to recruit and retain folks when we're having this tremendous amount of inflation? And personally, I don't think that a stipend or a bonus or a one-time payment is the right approach to manage this, just because inflation is going to be it's going to be a fixed cost. We're not going to see the employer or the salaries are coming back down when inflation comes back down. These new rates of pay are more or less going to be permanent. And so I think if we think of spot time bonuses, those are one-time payments, whereas the inflation is a fixed rate. Stipends are typically temporary as well, or situationally based. So that also doesn't feel like an appropriate adjustment or an appropriate response to inflation. And truly, I think as Jeremy said, or is kind of where we've got in here, is that the biggest changes that we're seeing, or the only way that you can really kind of address this, is with addressing it with an in-kind permanent adjustment. And that is going to be done through, merit adjustments, market adjustments, cost of labor adjustments, but really those things that are going to be permanent additions to employee pay. I think that as we've looked at a lot of the salary budget surveys this year, I think initially when they came out, they were suggesting a 3% pay adjustment. I think we all kind of sat back and said, oh, that feels kind of crazy that in this year that we're seeing these changes, or seeing a 3% budget. And as we got closer and closer to the merit cycles and to the actual times where people are actually putting their budgets together, it came back closer to 4%. And that still felt like a pretty low increase, because if you couple that with a 8.5% cost of, or a 8.5% inflationary rate, that essentially means that your employees have 4.5% less purchasing power than they had the previous year. But what I think is interesting is that it wasn't really addressed in some of the salary budget planning surveys. And correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone's seen anything different. But what I haven't seen is something that accounts for year-over-year adjustments. And that would be essentially, outside of that merit cycle, what other adjustments were made externally to that. And that could be market adjustments that were made. There were a lot of companies that recognized the challenge they were having to hire and retain folks. So they went through and they made a market adjustment. But they didn't build that. That didn't add that on top of. They didn't wait until the end of the year when they were doing their focal cycle or the merit adjustment. They took care of it pretty quickly. So I think that's been one of the really interesting things we look at is, we have kind of a finite or a myopic look at what are companies doing through the salary budget planning surveys, unless they are specifically addressing how much did a rate of pay change for a set of jobs from this year to last year. I mean, we look at the data in Squirrel. We can track baristas, for example. It's one of my favorites because I used to work at Starbucks. But we can track Starbucks, and they're earning 15, 16% more this year than they were last year. We can look at our warehouse workers and material handlers, and they're all earning about 12 to 13% over what they were earning last year. So, I think Jeremy's got a note in here that we were seeing, merit. And I don't know, for those folks that don't know Jeremy, he is the CEO, president of Empsite. And Empsite is a fantastic employer-reported salary survey source. They've actually got a couple of surveys they're running right now for some of these hot jobs like the warehouse and distribution folks. Jeremy, if you want to put the link in there, I know that there are some folks that are particularly interested in that right now. But I think that as we think of what we're seeing in some of these roles and kind of what companies are doing, those market adjustments have already been made, and I think are being made in addition to the merit adjustments. So I think that's just an important thing for us to consider as comp practitioners and trying to make sure that if you align your your merit budget survey to what the other that 4%, but you didn't make any other adjustments outside of that, then there's a very good chance that you are not staying competitive with the folks you're competing for talent with. So that's been a really, really hot topic that I think a lot of folks have been trying to figure out, what do we do right now? Because these things are very expensive to make these market adjustments. But so is 8.5% inflation rate. That is going to naturally include a large cost. Some of the other stuff that's coming up that we've seen this week is the New York City pay transparency law that is scheduled to go into effect May 15th. So there were a couple of things that came up about this, where some employers, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because this is a great point that Catherine makes, and it's actually dovetails very nicely with what John had mentioned in terms of chasing the market but not cost of living. So I think historically, Catherine's perfectly right. Historically, employers have not been able to keep up with the cost of living because pricing was dynamic. What we were seeing for a lot of folks historically was you may have a 3% merit adjustment, but a 2% structure adjustment. And so you start to see these changes happen, or you start to see this. But one of the things I always found was interesting was, us as comp practitioners, oftentimes we say, if we have a 0.9 comp ratio, or if we're 10% below what the rate of pay is, or below what our midpoint is, that feels pretty accurate, or that feels pretty competitive. But if you think about the historical 3% merit adjustments, and you think about the typical 2 to 2.5% adjustments to wages, not wages, but pay ranges. If you do the math, that's about a 10 to 11 year period of time that it takes somebody to catch the market, because they're only earning 1% over what the market is, how the market is moving. So that's one of the things to really consider is, I think if you're always chasing a moving target, it's going to take you a lot longer to hit that. So great points by everyone on here. So coming back to that New York City pay transparency law that we over here at CompTool are super excited for, because that's going to give Squirrel so much more data when the companies in New York are now publicly posting their pay ranges. If you think about it, we're super excited for that. But I think one of the things, that goes into effect May 15th. A while back, earlier in March, there was actually a bill that was being proposed, and that bill was going to push the effective date back to November 1st. It was going to exclude all employers that have fewer than 15 employees. That's interesting because that's actually there's a cutoff for employers in Washington State when that bill goes into effect. That anyone under 15 employees do not need to post their ranges. So that was something that was being proposed for the New York law. They were also changing the references from salary to reread to hourly or salary compensation. And they were also going to amend the law so that it would not apply to general notices without reference to particular positions and to positions that are not required to be performed in at least part of New York City. So these bills, there was some media saying that this was going to gut the bill. I think that you're still going to get a lot of value from this bill, even if these changes did take place. Now, this bill would have made these changes and kind of push back the implementation date or the effective date to November 1st. However, the committee is scheduled to reconvene on May 3rd, so next week, but this bill is not on the agenda. So it looks like the New York City pay transparency bill is going to carry forward as it was. And so Tyron has a great point. Syndio is doing a lot of conversations around this. Syndio is a really fascinating company. If you haven't checked them out, they are very focused in the area of pay equity. Always, something that's becoming more and more important. It's always been important, but it's becoming more and more top of mind for folks. So great company, check them out. Their value prop's actually a really interesting one. So I think I would certainly recommend looking in there. Yeah, Lori, Washington State, they passed, it was House Bill or Senate Bill 5761. That is going into effect on January 1st of 2023. So again, if you think about how much data Squirrel's already got, we've already got close to 5 million jobs that have been posted with ranges. Once we have Washington State and New York, that's going to provide a heck of a lot more value. And just think about it. California's got to be coming pretty soon after that, and many other states. So a couple other things. So I wanted to talk about Imp Sites. They've got a distribution and warehouse survey. I think Jeremy posted that in the chat already. And here was another one that I thought was kind of interesting. Had a lot of comments on one of the social media forums. This is pretty interesting, especially for folks considering looking at their CCP. The question was, or there was someone that was surprised that they did not get a pay bump whenever they received their CCP. They thought that once they finished their CCP, their employer would provide a pay bump. And I thought that was an interesting topic. I think as a practitioner, I actually thought the same thing. I was like, well, I'm certified now, so I put a lot of work into this, and I should get a pay bump. But what I actually thought was pretty interesting about this was there were some comparisons to, professional engineers. And well, if their organization provides a pay adjustment to a professional engineer, why wouldn't you have that if you are, a certified compensation professional? And I think that really it comes down to the core part of compensation market pricing a job anyway. Professional engineers have actually different kinds of capabilities they can do within their role. And it's not just, it's not a requirement to have a professional engineering degree or professional engineering certification for the sake of having it, because they can actually bind and seal plans. And there's really nothing in the compensation field that says we can't do the same thing someone with or without a certification can't do. There's not actually a change in our job. Now, it certainly creates a lot of additional opportunities for you as a compensation professional, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are able to do things that those without a CCP cannot do. So I thought this was kind of an interesting point, interesting kind of topic. And one, I almost promised when I was working through my CCP, as soon as I got finished, I was like, yes, I'm going to get that pay raise. But since I wasn't working for a company that was skill-based or certification-based, really ultimately it was what the company done was just a great service to me to make me more employable and more competitive in my own rate by paying for that certification. Those are not the cheapest certifications. So I thought that was a really great one to look at, a really great question. And then the other thing that came up was, this one comes up a lot lately, especially, is folks looking for salary surveys for IT tech jobs. So we've actually got a page on our site. It's comptool.com/blog/affordable-salary-surveys, affordable salary surveys. We've actually got 3 or 6, 8, 10 salary surveys that are tech-based, that are employer reported, and they're all under $3,000 a year. And so Mercer's in there, ImpSite is in there, Squirrel's in there. Squirrel, we we denote it by saying it's a market data tool, not a salary survey. Salary surveys are still going to be your kind of most trusted, most confirmed, and most reliable sources of what the market or what people are earning. Whereas Squirrel is a little bit different. It talks about what companies are willing to pay. They're both, coupled together. Fantastic, very holistic view of the market. But I certainly recommend taking a look at looking at some of those survey sources that we have. So CompTool.com, affordable salary surveys, -- in between the words. And then we've also got a whole list of notable salary surveys that don't meet that $3,000 requirement, but there's probably about 40 other survey providers that are all employer-reported, trusted data sources. And so this has just been another CompTool Tuesday. Again, the idea behind CompTool Tuesday is really just to have an informal conversation about what's going on. Sometimes we like to bring on guests or visitors. If anyone ever wants to come on as a guest and talk about comp, we'd love to have practitioners, consultants, other providers of resources, much like CompTool or Squirrel. We're really here as kind of practitioners for practitioners. So we want to be really open and kind of whatever we can do to help everyone out there. We'd be more than happy to bring folks on, talk about experiences, talk about recommendations, and really just kind of let the conversation go wherever it goes. So again, I'm Justin Hampton. I'm the founder of CompTool, market pricing and benchmarking solution with kind of one of the only real-time market data solutions, Squirrel. If you'd like to learn more, please feel free to reach out to me. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Or shoot us a note over at our CompTool page. Again, thanks so much for the time, and we look forward to another CompTool Tuesday next week. Thanks, everybody.